Hi, I'm Justin Moorman.
And I'm Katie Thornton, and this is the Re-Education of Schools podcast,
where we have open, honest conversations about how to better understand social-emotional learning, trauma-informed care, the whys behind student behavior, and how to help kids navigate it all as they go through school and life. All right, welcome back. Episode 19, The Adults Are Talking, Parent-Teacher Conferences. Hopefully, if you haven't had parent-teacher conferences yet this year, this is going to be helpful. Maybe you just had them, and you'll be able to be better next time after listening to this. I don't know. I don't know what our hope is. But regardless of where you're at with the time of year you're listening to this, we want to be able to talk about that, just the importance of parent-teacher conferences. I know in a previous episode we've talked about relationships with families, but this is such a specific moment in time, right, for teachers and parents. And so we wanted to be able to talk about maybe the approach, the mindset, things to do, things to stay away from doing during parent-teacher conferences, right?
Yeah, and this hopefully will air, at least for us anyways, right a little bit before parent-teacher conferences.
I think so.
Starting so hopefully.
I have no idea when parent-teacher, yeah, probably. Yeah,
yes,
you know the schedule better than I do.
Will. Yeah.
Okay, so as we talk about parent-teacher conferences, why are conferences important?
I think it's opportunities. So hopefully you're having lots of interactions with families prior to this moment. And we'll talk about things that go wrong. So if you've never talked to someone's family and this is the first interaction, maybe start working on that. There should be some communication going on.
Maybe evaluate your life a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe this is the point where you have to work on it. So this is the opportunity where you're probably getting your first in person. You probably don't even know what somebody's parents maybe even look like. Family dynamic, right? These are some...
Maybe in passing at an open house or something.
Yeah, this may be your first real, or you've only seen one parent and not the other, right? Yeah. This is our first time. So this is your opportunity to really think about your paraverbals, right? Your voice, tone, cadence, posture, and get really receiving somebody else's paraverbal. So, right, this is the first time where you're going to, either it's going to be welcoming or off-putting. So this is the time where it's going to really hit the ground running or make or break possibly a relationship through paraverbals and really put out your energy and your vibes and really what you're all about.
Sure.
So it's really the merge and solidification of hopefully a partnership that will be blooming here weeks to go. So just really, really important time to really have really a first date. You might even phone conversations and stuff, but it's really like a first date with a parent. Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Don't consider it.
Don't do it exactly like a first date. It gets you in a weird spot, maybe quick, but but kind of maybe like that. Yeah. I think this is again a purposeful time to talk.
Yeah.
I think that's important to remember. I think that's why they're important. Both, all those other touch points that you kind of were talking about are good. Those are good, moments, phone calls, notes, all those things, messaging back and forth, all of that kind of stuff is good and should be happening. But this is a really purposeful time to be in person and talk, and that both sides have kind of put this time aside. Sometimes the phone call, you're prepared for it. Parent maybe isn't, good or bad. The note, you sat down and took time to write the note out. They're just receiving it, and who knows what has been happening in their day before the phone call, before the note comes home, all those things. This is one of the few opportunities that both sides, or if they call you, right? Maybe they call you at the end of the day, want to talk, and you had no idea that was coming. This is a very specific time where both sides actually know it's coming, right? And have time to prepare mentally, think through things through. I think there's something to be said for that, right? That both people, both parties are prepared. And so that means it's important, and it's been important to both you and them. It's not just something that's happening because of something else. It's driven solely because of the time to talk. So I think that's important to remember, and that holds weight. I think it's hard to get much depth in those phone call kind of touch points or notes home, unless you're really talking for a long time. It's hard to have more depth. Even parent-teacher conferences are ultimately really quick hits of interactions. 15, 20 minutes, maybe. I can't imagine they're going much long. Maybe they are, but average, I would say probably 15, 20 minutes. And I think that that's still a lot different than those phone calls, as you're talking to somebody while they're at work and they're trying to get something done, that's real different. So make good use of that time, I think, because you can get a lot more depth to those interactions and conversations. And they give us a chance to remind everybody that this is a team effort. And I think yourself included. It's easy to always think like what we're doing to be part of that team for the parent, and that we're trying to remind them that it's a team effort. But I think it's a good time for you to be reminded that that it's a team effort as well. It's not just you.
It's a rare opportunity where you really have all the hopefully most of the team, if your child has extended service providers, or most of the team, other than like an IEP meeting. But you kind of get all the players at the table, that really the village that's supporting your child through school, if you have more than just the classroom teacher, the reading specialist, the gifted specialist, whatever it is.
Yeah, and for so many kids, it's not going to be that, right? And so this is one of the only times, and the team's relatively small. We get that there's teams of people at every school, whatever. But for most kids, the team it's pretty small. Like it's you, the parents. It's maybe it. It's not like necessarily a real huge team all the time. And so I just think it's a really purposeful time. And so not to like over like you don't want people freaking out about it, like putting too much intensity to it. But I think understand the importance of it and what kind of a almost said sacred, man, that makes it sound real intense, but a real specific kind of time that doesn't happen very often, even in a school year, right? I mean, we're talking once, maybe twice.
Yeah, and I would say, as from a parent perspective, going into your kids' conference, just curious, like parents value that time. I'm making time out of my day to stop and pause to come.
Yeah.
I found childcare to come in, to talk to you, to hear about how my kid's performing, and I think we'll talk about things that have gone well and not gone well and misses. But it's just the delivery of the information about how is really important.
Yeah, so. As a teacher and a parent, and we were both in this position, right? I think parent-teacher conferences changed for me once I had a kid, once my kids were old enough to be in school.
Yep.
Like how I viewed them, because there is such a difference of, you don't know, like you're sending your kid and they're gone all day. And then you don't know what's happening. Like, so you want to know, like, is it going all right? Do they have friends? Like, how are they doing with academics?
Does their teacher like them?
Like, all the things, right? Yeah, it's a lot. You're trying to gauge a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it's really important that for me, that I feel like my kids are liked at school. So if you walk away from that conference thinking, I don't think their teacher even likes them. What is going on during the day, right?
Yeah, that's going to affect, talk about the rest of the year. So, okay, so how can we create strong partnerships at these conferences then?
Okay, well, I was the researcher this time.
Yeah, do it.
And the Ohio Education Association, I thought, had some really good points out, so I'm just going to share what OEA has to share.
Sure.
Don't wait to make contact until it's time to schedule a conference.
Oh, so that's not just your idea.
Yeah, this is like Ohio
Other
Education.
people think that too.
Yeah,
it's good to know.
I actually wrote this for OEA. No,
you're like on the side, you're working for them.
Yeah. Start an anecdotal record for students with serious behavior or learning problems, right? Start having some data-based information set up, I think, right?
Yeah, that's a good one too, because I think, especially if it's been a tough 2 days leading up to conferences, like you can get stuck in a spot. You got to be aware of that, like where you are basing everything you're talking about off the year and off of facts, not just how you feel or how it's been going over the last couple days.
Yeah, you talk about this all the time, but like the last 2 weeks, that's our feeling. Everything's good.
Yep.
That's bad, right? So I think let's let data inform our decisions. Schedule adequate time. I see this as a problem. If you have a lot of people at the table, you need to make sure, and some kids take longer. Some kids you can get in and out in 15 or 20 minutes, no problem. Sure. Know the kids that need the hour conference, right? Like schedule enough time and be respectful of time and being on time for people. Try scheduling your conference at unconventional times and places to accommodate the differing needs of today's families. So
that's a good idea.
Yeah, work with your school administrator if you need to do that. Consider creating a fact sheet about your classroom to give to parents at conferences. Maybe there's things they might need to know going in. Make parents or guardians feel welcome. So we always talk about this, like how do we feel sense of belonging, sense of safety, right? Mm-hmm. You want to have open conversations and dialogue. How's someone going to feel safe with you? Arrange for special assistance in advance. So think about your families that might need an interpreter. I think ELL, that's a big one. Like, think about maybe you don't have a great relationship with the parent. They're not responding to you, but my golly, that school counselor has built a relationship where they're texting this parent and they respond right away. Maybe invite that school counselor to your meeting, or that teacher from the intervention specialist that's really close with that teacher.
Yeah.
Or that student. So think about the safe person that maybe can bring that person to the table. Set a positive tone. Be specific about what your needs and concerns are. Take a problem-solving approach. Like, hey, this happened, but here's like, what are your ideas that we're a team? Stress cooperation, that we have to work together. End on a positive note. and keep a record of the conference.
Yeah. Those are good ones. I think one of the things I kept thinking about, and we talk about this a lot, is being genuine, right? I think we sometimes have a tendency to want to like put on ourselves differently. And I think the people that tend to have, that I've witnessed, experienced, whatever, that tend to have the best results, I guess, from parent-teacher conferences and things like that are people that are pretty genuine and are who they are. I mean, be like appropriate and such, but like be, if who you are is a jerk, don't do that. But I think be genuine, be who you are, because people know when people are being fake, right? And I think that's a red flag for me as a parent. And I would imagine for a lot of parents out there, if you're like, if you walk away and you're like, I don't think I'm getting the whole story, or like something seemed off about that person, like don't just be a put on version of yourself. Again, be appropriate, be professional, but I think be also genuine. And I think that can be hard when you are, if you've got 30 kids in your room and you've got a very finite amount of time to do parent-teacher conferences that are set aside by the district or something, you're kind of rapid firing people in and out, I mean, you got the next family sitting in chairs in the hallway while you're finishing up this one and you're just going straight into it. I mean, it can be hard to, and it's tiring as a teacher, let's acknowledge that. But I think be who you are. And
let's circle back to the why parent-teacher conferences are tiring. It's because your stress response system, is constantly skating. So this goes back to the neuroscience. People say, I just sat here for 4 hours. Why am I so exhausted? It's because you're constantly multitasking, scanning for safety around new people that are entering the room. So your sympathetic nervous system's triggered. You're mentally and physically exhausted after conferences because of that.
Yeah, so you can't check out because you're the one driving the ship the whole time.
Yeah, not a lot of time for regulation to happen or that reset. So that's probably something intentional that you need to think about as you're scheduling a conference. When's the time that I can have a moment to myself? Can I put a break in there so I can deep breath? It's really tough to go hard for 3.5 hours of parent-teacher conference. Your nervous system can't keep up with that.
And as much as you can, like just aside from work in your personal life, try to set up the day around it, before, after, that night, whatever. Try to set it up to where you're not doing something also like really intense that's draining for you, to where you're just completely zapped, and shot for the next however long.
That's such a good point. I think we both have lived through that this past year, and we're what were we thinking when we said we were... it's too much. These things were all going to happen.
The other thing I thought was, and then we've talked about this before, and it kind of goes back to that strengths finder thing, but like offering trust, compassion, stability, and hope, right? That's what people want. It's what people want out of jobs, we've expressed that being important in classrooms. I think that's important in a quick hit kind of setting. That's an important thing to be able to try to focus on with parents, right? If you can show that you're trustworthy, that you get it. Like if it's a tougher situation, you have compassion with them. You're not just, it's not that you just don't care about any of their situation or what's going on in their lives, that you're stable, you're being a relatively stable presence for them, and then that you can offer them hope. And I think that's important, especially if the kid's doing well and if the kid's, struggling in any area, right? The kid's struggling in reading. You need to be able to provide hope. Like, well, yeah, they are behind. I've experienced it with my kids. Like they're behind in reading, when they were in earlier elementary school, but here's what we're going to do. And we've seen great results with this. And, we fully expect they're going to jump back up. You don't just leave it with, they're really behind. I guess we'll see what happens.
Hopefully, you would work a little harder at home.
Hopefully they, if you would do more. What are you doing at home? You're not doing anything. Yeah, like that's not great. So being able to provide that, I think, is helpful too.
I always leave from the years of mentoring. I always tell new teachers this: parents want to know that you like their child. Mm-hmm. They want to feel that you like them, that their kids are happy at school.
Sure.
And that they're making progress. Those are the 3 things you got to communicate.
Yeah.
Are they happy? Do they have friends? Do I like your child? And are they making progress? Yeah. That's it.
Well, and here's the thing too. Like if it's been going poorly significantly poorly in any area, whether that's behaviorally or academically or whatever, if it's been going really poorly, you probably have been in contact with a parent. If you haven't been, again, to your point, like it shouldn't be the first time. Like that's a mistake I'm sure both of us wrote down. But they've already heard the bad.
Yeah.
They've probably already heard the bad or the concern or the whatever. I'm not saying you ignore the bad, But I do think that you, or the negative or the area that needs growth, I'm not saying you ignore that, but I think this is also a time that you have the chance to really highlight the good and understand that if they've heard anything, they've probably already heard the bad or the tough, or they've seen the graded papers or whatever it might be. Just make sure that you're not taking the time to just do that, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Because that's not a good way to build a strong partnership, right? They're not going to want to talk to you anymore. All right. So what are the things that we should not be doing at conferences? I feel like this could be the rest of the episode. What are the things that you should not do at conferences?
Let's just start with don't present yourself as something you're not, right?
Yeah, sure.
Like if you showed up in a 3-piece suit at conferences, that would be what is going on, right?
Yeah.
Like just come naturally as you are, as you present yourself every day at school, like that genuine appearance and environment and casuality about yourself that I think
How do you feel about how I dress?
No. Okay, let me tell you. When I first started teaching, this was a big deal. And, it's 20 years ago, right? People used to bring in, like, suits to wear. Like, people got really dressed up for conferences. I've seen that trend definitely decrease, but it was a big deal. People went and got, like, even women would wear suits and formal dresses that you probably would wear at a wedding or a funeral or something like that. They would get really dressed up for parent-teacher conference. It was a big deal. Pantyhose, high heels, right? The whole deal.
I'm teaching apparently at the right time in history.
Yeah.
Because that is not my gig.
It was a big deal to do that. Huh. So I was like, I feel like that comes off. I don't feel like that's necessary. Like, sure. So I just want, if that's something someone's telling you to do, I don't feel like you need to. I think when you start with that negative vibe, right, come off the first things out of your mouth is, let me just tell you, this has not been going well. Yeah. You've killed the partnership. It's hard enough to get people at the table right now, especially for some of our disengaged families. That's not how we're going to re-engage them. We need to have those micro interactions to get them at the table. So if this is your first micro interaction, make it a positive one. You make it about the parents' problem to fixed. Like, your kid's really rude and sassy. If you would discipline them more.
What are you doing at home to address this? They keep coming here and doing it.
Yeah.
So what are you doing at home?
Have you talked to their doctor?
Giving them any consequence? Are they just allowed to do whatever they want? Yeah, like things like that.
Yeah. Collaborating with our colleagues on the spot. So if you have a tough conference coming up, and if you've not talked to your team to make up a plan of what you're talking about, how you're addressing it, maybe who's going to take point on stuff, and we're just like flying off the cuff at the conference. Yeah. I've seen that go real poorly, real fast.
I've been a part of some of those before, because I've worked, nature of, again, my job, I've always had teams, so throughout my career, there have been times that I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden somebody's saying something. I'm like, whoa.
What are you doing?
Like, what is happening right now? Like,
you just killed all of it.
Yeah, I was like,
we're not talking about that. So
really
I think that
throws you off.
Yeah, communication with your team prior to going into the conference. Have a plan. I think we both can say guilty. Didn't see that one coming, or I didn't prepare enough, and I sat in there. But just learn from your mistakes and really try to, because then you're going back and repairing. So that 20-minute conference, now I've got to spend 2 hours this next 2 months having some micro interactions to repair this parent.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Sure. So, yeah. Think about DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion work. Think about your bias.
Yeah.
You assuming somebody's not coming because they're lazy. They don't care about their kid.
Yep.
You're uninvolved. If you would just, right? Think about your cultural lens, your cultural bias. Think about some of those things as you're addressing parents, especially if you don't have a lot of experience working with diverse populations of students. I think you really, really think about your own biases and how it's going to impact you, how you are addressing a parent. Assuming that a parent doesn't know what you're talking about, or we try to often edu-speak parents.
Yeah.
We edu-speak our colleagues sometimes. Like, we're talking. We don't need to start talking about neuroscience, like, and not in a very technical way to parents.
Yeah, sure.
Or some of the reading. We talk about reading vocabulary, like how to instruct reading, right? You're going to lose a parent. They're not teachers.
Yeah.
So bring yourself back down to speak in a way that any professional, any parent would understand.
Yeah, I think that's important too, because I am a teacher, right? You are a teacher, but if you go to different districts, use different things.
Yeah.
And I've been in different districts. I've never worked in the same district that my kids attend.
Yeah.
And so they use different testing. They use different, all the acronyms are different. And I've sat there before and I'm like, whoa, like, what is that one for? Like, what's that mean?
Yeah.
And I'm I'm living it for years and years and years, right? And so imagine if you have just zero clue, you know, you're just working at a bank somewhere, and then like you show up and people are rattling stuff off. You really have to keep that in mind.
Make sure you explain and simplify what you're talking about. Don't go in with a right versus wrong attitude. I'm right, you're wrong.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you what needs to happen. I don't think that ever comes off well as well either.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, I think that's the biggest one. Like, if it's a tough, your easy conferences with the kids that are doing really well, you probably don't need much help with those. Hopefully, you don't need much help with those. If you find that you're screwing those conferences up, maybe you should seek some help from your colleagues. But I do think it's the tough conversations. It's the, hey, they're behind in this. It's the, hey, it seems like they're kind of struggling in this area. Hey, that behaviorally always seems to be like the toughest kind of conferences if it's not going well behaviorally in some way. And I think that in those moments, what we don't want to do is just sit there and blast the kid, right? This isn't your chance. I think sometimes we get into the spot where it's like our chance to like show that kid by telling their parent what's going on, and then they're going to get it from their parent, right? Like that's like our hope. I don't think anybody would actually say that. Hopefully they wouldn't actually say that, but I mean, that's 100% like the approach I've seen happen before, where they're like, now I'm going to sit here and tell you. And I'm like, oh, they know, like they know already. Again, you've been calling them every day or sending it home every day, or, you know, this is how they've been for years. Like they've been struggling in these areas. Like they're not unaware. So like, don't just spend that time absolutely blasting that kid, hoping that the kid then gets it, whatever that means, from their parent. Right. And then I also don't want to have that mean like, by all means, share concerns, right? I think that's important, but don't make whatever it is that's concerning. And you said this, right? Like that it's about the parent. Like you should be, I'm sure if you've done conferences before and you've had to talk about, you know, behavior or tough things like that, immediately you watch parents go into like a defensive mode of, you know, like they never do this at home, or like I work with them every night on this thing, and true or not doesn't even matter, but you can see from a parent's side, they're like, I want to show that I'm a good parent right now to somebody that's a professional sitting in front of me working with my kid. I feel like I have to prove that I'm good. To be able to put people's minds at ease and hearts at ease that we're in this together. I don't think you've done anything wrong. You know, I think that we're working hard, and I know that you've tried all these things, you know, and that you're working hard at it. And I appreciate all the hard work, and it's got to be tough sometimes to, you know, find the time to do these things. Like, that's okay. I understand that too. Building that like trust and that it's okay. Like I'm not expecting all of a sudden a ton from you. I think that's super helpful. And then we also should not do is get defensive ourselves, because the other thing that can happen quickly is, well, I heard like you did this. Like my kid said, you don't do this. My kid said you are doing this, or you are saying this. Like it's so easy to jump to like being defensive. Cause again, like I think Katie, to your point, was really good earlier. You're already tired. It's your 9th conference that afternoon. You did conferences all the night before, you know, who knows the scenario. And now you got somebody that you didn't expect talking about how you're not good at your job, you feel like, and it would be easy to jump to being defensive so quickly and to have all of a sudden it become a contentious kind of situation. Yeah.
Your emotional intelligence has dropped.
Yeah.
You're not operating at full capacity. You would not respond if that parent talked to you 2 days later when you're well rested.
Yeah. And so just remember, sometimes the best response is just listening and saying, you know, okay, well, I'm hearing your concerns. I think we should talk about this more, you know, later. Let's set up another time, because I do have another conference coming. If you feel yourself getting like real amped up, and especially if it's just you don't have a team around you, I think it's okay. Call it, right? Say, hey, I actually have another conference coming in, or I have, you know, a meeting coming up, but we do need to let's schedule another time, because it seems like we have some more stuff to talk about. Yes. And get yourself into a spot where you have support, that you can plan, that you can think ahead. And that you can be more emotionally ready to handle that. Don't get yourself in a spot where you're like in the moment trying to have these reactions. And listen, some parents can say, depending on what your job is, some tough. I've had some pretty bold accusations made against me in the course of my career, and you know, you always have the choice to sit there and try to, that's not how I am, and that's not what I do, or to acknowledge it, understand, hey, you're sorry somebody feels that way, and you're gonna hopefully be working with them really closely to show that that's not the case.
I hear you. Let's make a plan if your kid feels that way.
And then hopefully you're spending that time winning those people over anyway, and showing them who you really are and what you're really about. So, but just don't let yourself get into that moment right then, because it's easy to get defensive because, again, you're tired, all the things we said. All right. So what should the outcome of these conferences be? Like, what are we kind of hoping for?
Yeah, I would say a sense of safety. Parents feel safe and vulnerable to share that maybe things aren't going well at home. That I'm vulnerable enough to say, like, actually, this is actually what's going on in our family right now.
Yeah.
We're not at our best. I'm struggling right now. I've taken on another job, or we had a new sibling introduced to the family. Maybe parents aren't together. I mean, there's lots of things that happen in the home dynamic that have nothing to do with school that are impacting maybe someone's sick in the house, right? Like, there's lots of things. So hopefully they feel safe and vulnerable enough to share and be vulnerable and seek help and assistance from you as a support person, or to create the partnership of, you know what, I'm willing to try that if you're willing, that we can work on this together, kind of thing. That sense of belonging, they feel part of the school community, and that them and their child belong there, and that we have a partnership that's going to start now and last for a very long time. And the output's going to be increased student success.
Yeah. I think just better understanding and relationship, right? That's what we're hoping for at the end. And then being a team with the family. I think those two things are, hugely important. Again, understanding what our role is in that too, I think is just such an important thing. Like, we're asking people to come into our environment that's basically our home, right? We're there all the time. Mm-hmm. That's maybe a terrible way to think about it, ultimately, from mental health perspective. You shouldn't think of your classroom as your home. I've actually talked about that, like, not doing that. But it's asking them to come into a place that we're incredibly comfortable with and be
around people we know really well.
Yeah. And we have a plan.
Stuff.
Yeah, and we have a plan. Hopefully, again, as we've said, you should have a plan. And so they're coming in. Well, they've planned out that they're coming in. Man, they don't necessarily know always what to expect. And it's just understand, like, the situation really, and what kind of power you have to be able to make it a really positive experience for the parents, even if it's tough conversations. I think that's the key. Like, you can have really tough conversations and still have it be like a really positive conference, and having parents walk away having a really positive feeling about the year. It doesn't just have to be like, it's all rainbows and unicorns, and that's the only way that they're going to feel good. I've walked away from my own kids' conferences hearing some things that I'm like, oh, like, man, they're behind in this area still. Again, this year, like, we've really been working on that. But feeling good about what the plan is and who we've got on board and all of that. So, but you have to do that intentionally.
And we here at the MTSS, multi-tier systems of supports, just set up structures within your school system that support this, not just at parent-teacher conferences. There should be communication with parents if that kid is in a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention cycle, IEP, students on IEPs, assistance plans, those kind of things. You should have some communication with families to set up. That's part of that partnership through that MTSS process too. Yeah. So hopefully if you don't have that in your building, that's something that you can start building that foundation or that network for that tier process.
All right. Well, what do you want people to walk away knowing after this episode?
Really, this is like the foundation, right? So especially that first parent-teacher conference, it's the foundation that is going to make somebody think they can trust or distrust you. It is going to set the tone for your entire school year. It's important they go really well, so start being intentional about that. Yeah. I think your advice was great. Pause. No, you don't have to respond to everything. I'm not real sure, but I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
That's an
great phrase.
Great phrase. But it's really a year-long partnership, and that it should be without judgment, and it's really a gift to yourself. You're going to make your year easier if you can communicate these things well early on, and it will end up being really powerful when you do need to call about something else. Yeah. Moving on. Yeah.
So here's what I was thinking as I kind of thought about this. The parent is not joining your team for the year. You're joining their team for the year. And I think that's shift. Like a small kind of, it might seem like an insignificant kind of small shift in thinking, but I think it's actually pretty huge because, you're like a 1-year teammate. You're like on loan.
Yeah.
Kind of for 1 year. Yeah. You're the baseball trade deadline, like rest of the year kind of person, right?
Yeah.
You're not this long-term thing. I mean, a year is a long time, but you're in it for 1 year. They are in the business of making their kids' team run and work for 18 years. And more, ultimately, right? That's what they're in the business of, and you are one of those years. So we're not asking them to join our team. We're joining their team. And I think that it's up to you, it's up to me, it's up to us to be the best like 1-year teammate we can be. And I think if we have that mindset of what can I do to help out and be a really solid teammate for this family and for this kid for this year, so that they look back and think, man, that was a really good teammate to have, right? As opposed to us trying to jam them into whatever we think our system is. We're joining whatever they got going already. And that's hard. It's a tough thing as a teacher to do that with, again, 20, 30, whatever it is, 100 and however many, like at a middle school and high school level, right? It's hard to do, but that's what our role is. And it's a really big responsibility, and hopefully it's something that we take seriously and that we're not just brushing it off.
Yeah. And I would say probably I'm a little biased because we're elementary educators, really. But I think sometimes we have missed opportunities as our kids get into older grades that we don't conference with parents.
Yeah.
We make it optional for the kids that are in need.
Yeah.
But I think it's a missed opportunity, especially for mental health check-in. Kid could be a high-performing student and mental health-wise not doing well. So if we can get in the habit of checking in with parents, all of our kids, who's accountable for that kid? We talked about that before.
Yeah.
Are we missing some of those kids?
Know your team. Talk to your team at work, right? Your grade level team, whatever it is, whatever your team is at the middle school, high school level that you might be a part of, and find out like who is connecting with this one. Yeah.
And who's connecting at home with parents.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if we're not communicating, then are we missing, especially through adolescent brain years, right?
Yeah,
when
tough.
All this pruning's happening again. We really need to have that whole village surrounding those kids, especially in those middle school years. And as we get into early high school years, that we should be checking in with the homeschool partnership.
Yeah.
To make sure things are on track. Yep.
Well, thank you guys, as always, for joining into the conversation. I think that if you, hopefully this is helpful, regardless of who you are, right? And however long you've been teaching, I would suggest and maybe ask that if you're at a building or if you know some brand new teachers, this would be such an easy 30-minute episode for you to pass on to them, to be like, hey, we know we've got conferences coming up. Why don't you listen to this? It's 20, 30 minutes, of your time. Well, I guess not 20 minutes. That'd be a lie. It's about 30 minutes of your time. Listen to it. And I think that can go a long way. Hopefully it could go a long way. Hopefully it might spark questions in their minds, then to come back and ask you as somebody who's been around doing it for a few years at least. And I think that could be really helpful because this is a really intimidating time. Parent-teacher conferences are for brand new teachers who haven't had to do it or gotten to do it yet before. And so maybe give them, this is like an easy, I don't want to call it training, but a little bit, and maybe at least gets them thinking. So I'd really encourage you, pass it on to somebody that's maybe new, or we've said this, I think, before. Maybe if you know somebody doesn't do particularly well at parent-teacher conference time, maybe have them listen to it too. Be like, hey, I've been listening to this podcast.
Maybe your team listens to it and refines conference practices, right?
Great. Yeah, maybe you use it as a staff meeting, right? Like, I don't know, but I think there's usefulness, and it's not, you don't want to see something that is a night or two, an afternoon or two, day or two in your school. You don't want to see that turn into something that's really big and hard to deal with because somebody wasn't thinking through what they were going to do. So I think there's usefulness in that. Pass it on. Hopefully it's useful. Hopefully you found it useful yourself. And yeah, we just always appreciate you jumping in with us. Let's go out there and do the work.
Let's go do it.
Hey everybody, let's keep the conversation going.
Like and subscribe below and keep the comments rolling.